I'm pleased to be joined again by Richard James DeSOCIO. He's the author of Clash of Dynasties. This is our second conversation, and I'll link our first conversation below, as well as to his book. Richard, thanks for being with me.
Yes, good to be here.
There's a few things I know that you specifically want to talk about, and we'll get into that. Just to follow up on our previous conversation, which was the rise of Rockefeller. I want to touch base on World War II and the Rockefeller role during that particular time period. Two questions for you. Nelson Rockefeller was in charge of the Department of Inter-American Affairs.
Correct.
Uh,
Uh,
how, go ahead.
it was the Office of Coordinator of Inter-American Affairs. It was the OCIAA. And he was Mr. Coordinator. I always call him Mr. Coordinator. And it was operating out of Rockefeller Center.
Okay, ostensibly a kind of harmless sounding title, but one with great ramifications, and he had a lot of agents working for him. Is that correct?
1,500.
So what was going on with that? What was that, and why did he have so many people working for him at this time?
It was purely a Rockefeller creation. Anything the Rockefellers do is to empower themselves worldwide. But he met with Roosevelt. He walked in with Roosevelt's office, and supposedly Roosevelt granted him this power. It was a creation of the Rockefellers to basically, they claimed they were going to oppose Nazi fifth columns in Latin America. So I don't necessarily think that was so true. And on the surface, it was supposed to be a cultural exchange with Latin America. With Nelson Rockefeller coined the name, our good neighbors to the south. And don't forget, there was years there of American imperialism in Latin America, which was extremely violent. There's a tremendous history of that, including the Mexican-American War. And so they put on a new touch. They called it, it was supposed to be a cultural exchange. And it featured all sorts of culture, art, music, paintings. That's kind of where George Marinci kind of entered into this thing. Kind of served, but underneath it was an intelligence operation. And it had also history associated with it. I don't know that much about it, but Truman shut it down. And in its place, Truman created the CIA, which was a merger of the old CIAA, and the FBI had a blocked out operation called the Special Units, a special unit operation, also operated out of Rockefeller Center. So it was a merger of that and merger of Nelson Rockefeller's operation, and they called it the CIA. And a lot of those people later affiliated with the Kennedy assassination, actually connected with the CIA, actually traced back into history when Nelson was Mr. Coordinator. Dulles, Helms, Tracy Barnes, and the list goes on and on.
Let me
William Harvey.
Yeah, Bill Harvey for sure. Now, Mr. Coordinator, when he's overseeing these cultural exchanges and these brothers, these sister cities kind of exchanging flowers and stuff like that, you're not buying any of that for a second. This is purely a kind of propaganda front for other things that are going on. And we just, and right.
The cultural exchange did exist, but it was a front. The Rockefellers, it was a front for nefarious purposes. I don't understand the whole scope of it. A lot of the knowledge that I think came through the writings of Emanuel Josephson, who wrote more extensively on it. Supposedly Truman shut it down because they were involved and they were getting complaints out of South America because of their nefarious activities down there. I don't know the whole laundry list of these things. So Rockefeller world is so vast, you can never reach its outer limits.
Okay, let's move on to a couple of things that you specifically wanted to get into. There's some new information that's coming into your purview. Before we do that, though, you were sharing with me some snippets and some screenshots from the 1961 film Breakfast at Tiffany's. That's the Audrey Hepburn and George Papard film. Um, it was interesting. Why were you sending me these, and what was striking you about it?
Because it represented a power structure. There's actually one more picture I haven't sent you yet. I'm going to
Yeah.
probably send it out. It's the first chance I got. But it shows a power structure. These addresses I discovered, I mean, they're famous addresses, but I came to those addresses through the Warren Commission documents, specifically document 533, which was the wartime intelligence, George Morenshits, who was Oswald's closest associate in the days leading up to the JFK assassination, was under FBI surveillance during World War II as a possible German agent. And they had a huge dossier. I don't know how big it is, but the FBI for the Warren Commission did a summary report of it. They took some documents out of it, which is about 70 pages, which I've reviewed. So all those addresses that I'm showing you came out of those documents. It's a power structure, and it's right in the shadows of Rockefeller Center. I mean, they would go to those addresses. The movie went to those addresses innocently when they went to those addresses. But George's office, there, with Edward Hooker Morenchi, was right on the corner there across the street from Tiffany Diamonds.
Right.
That's the richest shopping desk. And he was selling his artwork. That's the picture I want to send you. When, at 57, or maybe 5 doors down in the Newton Gallery, George had 70 paintings that he painted when he was down in Mexico, probably part of this sharing of cultural art with Nelson Rockefeller. And he had 70 paintings there. And there is documents to the Smithsonian Institute has documents. I want to write and get them. I'm going to try to get them with correspondences from Nelson Rockefeller. I tied it at the same address with Nelson Rockefeller, FDR, and George Morenchi's brother. They have a 3-inch stack of documents from that Newton Art Gallery where George was displaying 70 paintings. Now, how do I know that? It was in the Warren Commission.
Wow.
So these are power, I mean, these were power centers. And especially 370 Park, which was the most prestigious club. Well, I got it right here, actually. George sent this. Can we see this? Can you see anything? Can you see me?
Now back it up a little bit, because back it up by you. Totally out of focus.
Okay, it's okay. It's a postcard that came from 370 Park. This is the most prestigious address in Manhattan. And if the camera angle had been the other way I wrote that, we would have saw Rockefeller Center towering in the background. You would have saw 370. You would have saw 3 Rockefeller Plaza towering in the background, and they all belong there. And it was built in part by John Hay Whitney's father, who I connect John Hay Whitney to the Kennedy assassination, and he was a co-coordinator when Nelson Rockefeller was Mystic coordinator. John Hay Whitney was co-coordinator along with Wallace Harrison. He was a co-coordinator. It goes on and on and on. All connections to the Rockefellers.
So let's just give this a little bit of context for people. If you pull up that film, and I can't remember, I think Blake Edwards may have directed that film. I could be wrong, but we're seeing shots of Audrey Hepburn's character walking around Manhattan.
Right.
And it's funny, this is filmed at the very same time. I mean, it's not just the building,
Yes.
it's the exact same time up in those buildings.
Yes.
Conniving and
Planning to kill JFK.
Right, at the same time.
Exactly.
That postcard, are you referencing the one that George sent to Dallas summer of 63?
Yeah.
Okay.
Warren Commission documents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
And that's 370 Park, also known as the Rocket and Tennis Club, which is on Park Avenue, of course, and it's one of the most. And John Hay Whitney belonged to it. Well, conspiracy theorists. Warren Commissioner John McCloy and Alan Dulles were known to play tennis there and racquetball there. George actually, when he married, George married twice a very wealthy woman from old families. He actually lived catty corner on 54th, corner 54th. Yeah, corner 54th and Park, which is catty corner from that address. He actually lived there. That's a very valuable piece of real estate. George lived there with his first bride, Pearson was her name, Dorothy Pearson. She was from a very wealthy New York City old family. That marriage didn't last long, but they did produce a daughter, Alexa, who is mentioned in Warren Commission documents as having been providing, well, he said Marina, Oswald's wife. She lived with her for a while. Oswald's wife, as per Warren Commission documents, lived with George's daughter. And they also moved, George's daughter, they moved Oswald and Marina from Fort Worth to Dallas. They were moving these people around and supplying them with money.
Yeah.
They're not much, but how much is not much?
Yeah.
And that was the daughter that George had with Dorothy Pearson. And he did not raise her. It was raised by her family. Now, author Bruce Adamson believes she's related to Nelson Rockefeller's wife. Dorothy Pearson's mother is related to Nelson Rockefeller's wife. Clark is her name.
The first one?
The first wife.
Okay.
Yeah. But they're related, and I probably are. These are old wealthy families who are marrying old wealthy families. And you can stand where they got married. George Morenci and Dorothy got married in Elysee Hotel, which is a luxury hotel. If I stand in front of that hotel, George stood there, I think it was 1943, he got wed to that lady. I can look down the street and see where the townhouse where Nelson Rockefeller died with a younger lady. It's actually 13 West 54th Street. And if you look to the right, you see their home, their townhouse where the newlyweds moved into. I'm sure it was family money and family property. Then they lived.
Good.
I don't want too many details lose people.
Let's just circle the gap, on 750 Park Avenue. You found a New York Times article from 1965 on the club, the Explorers Club. You remember that? You said you can rate 1,000 pages on
it. You can't believe what I'm finding.
Okay, first of all,
I'm not going to first of all, I don't want to reveal it now. I'm going to send a letter to them, to the Explorers Club, to see if they give me more information. I need to spend more time studying before I start revealing this to the public. It's going to be a big chapter in my new book.
All right.
And you're not going to believe it. You're not going to believe it when you see it.
Just tell us what the Explorers Club is, though. Why should we care about that? Just give us a.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
The Explorers Club, Rockefeller, Carnegie, these titans of industry were financing explorations around the world in search of, well, back in the day, oil seepages, in search of natural resources. Teddy Roosevelt's trips to Africa were financed by Andrew Carnegie. So what are they looking for? Iron ore? See, and Admiral Byrd, when he went down to Antarctica, that was all financed by Rockefeller. And they were using Collins radios. Well, Oswald met a general. Okay, where's Radio City? Rockefeller Center. Okay. Oswald was introduced to a general. This is from the Warren Commission, he was overseeing the contract for Collins radio. And Collins radio Admiral Byrd was using Collins radio to communicate with civilization. That was a constant link to the Rockefellers. And these explorers are being bankrolled by these wealthy titans in pursuit of natural resources.
Yeah, and what's the problem with that here, Richard? This is what I want to ask you. Why the Rockefellers are doing great work for the country, aren't they? I mean, they're finding oil, they're keeping our gas, our cars running, man. So maybe we're looking too into this. What do you think when people say that to you?
Not at all, because all these people linked in 1963. They pop up, and you experience this yourself, and that's why you came to me. I was studying the Rockefellers as legitimate businessmen, and I kept coming across names that were popping up in the Kennedy assassination story.
Yeah.
This is how they connect. Yeah, they have a legitimate side to their business, okay, but they also have a very nefarious side. The oil industry is a ruthless industry to begin with, and they were the most ruthless. And I mean ruthless, I mean murder is very part of their toolbox. They don't hesitate to shoot. They may avoid, that might be their last choice, but they don't hesitate. They're not philanthropists, but I don't want to get off the question, your line of questioning.
Okay. Well, so
When you
you don't really want to tell us much about what, that's fine, and I respect that. Can you give us an idea of,
Well, the only reason it's not ready for for
Yeah,
consumption,
it's
it
fine.
needs more research. I'm going to just tell you one thing.
Yeah.
Most of the names in this committee were all connect to 1963.
What, the committee, the Warren Committee?
Yes, they
Yeah.
all connect to the Kennedy assassination. Okay, there's 4 Rockefellers at this meeting at the sports club. They were holding a gala event at the Waldorf Astoria. Guess what the date was? November 22nd, 1965. Are you going to tell me that's a coincidence? November 22nd? That's the anniversary of Kennedy's assassination. Okay. All right. Who's at the middle of this meeting? There's 4 Rockefellers here. I could go on, and John Hay Whitney is
Mhm.
also here. Okay. Guess who's right in the middle of the 4 Rockefeller brothers? Allen Dulles. He's sitting in a room with one of the greatest assemblies of power in history, and here's right in the middle of it, Warren Commissioner Allen Dulles. So who wrote the Warren Commission report? I could go on and on. Oh, Roger Blau. We talked about Roger Blau. He was there. Conrad Hilton. We talk about gangsters. Bobby Kennedy's book. Right here. He talked about Albert Anastasia. Where did they work out of? The Waldorf Astoria. Who ran the Waldorf Astoria? Conrad Hilton.
Is this the enemy within you're holding up right there?
Yeah, yeah. How much? I could go on and on and on. It doesn't end. Oh, here's another name. Dewey, Governor Dewey. How would he tie it? How does he tie to the Kennedy assassination? Because he ran on a ticket with who? Earl Warren. Okay. Who ran his campaign? The Dulles brothers. Norman Vincent Peale was at the meeting.
Yeah, let's talk about him. Wait a minute. Let's talk about
Oh,
that.
wait a minute, one more. E. Roland Harriman. The Harrimans,
Oh,
they were skull and bones. I mean, along with being super rich top railroading family with the Vanderbilts and intermarried, they were also skull and bones. Skull and bones, Henry Luce, skull and bones. See, I want to get the whole list. And then it goes on with Bill Paley, goes on and on. All these names connect.
Is McCloy there? Was McCloy there?
Richard Nixon. No, that's why I want to see if I can get the entire guest list.
Okay.
Okay.
John McCloy.
And who are they honoring? Who are they honoring? Lowell Thomas. How does that tie?
Mm.
I'm going to tell you how it ties. It ties this Lowell Thomas, he's the explorer. Okay. Lowell Thomas, this was the handshake that gave the Rockefellers the oil rights in Saudi Arabia. This handshake led to that because Lowell Thomas was close with who? Lawrence of Arabia.
T.E. Lawrence.
He ran a proxy war in the Saudi Peninsula, fighting who? The Turks.
That's right.
Who was in that allied force with him? Ivan Saud, the Saud family. The Saud family met with the Rockefellers and shook hands to form Aramco. Lowell Thomas, I believe, was the handshake that gave them the rights to the Saudi oil fields. That's $1 billion in wealth. This woman, I don't want to bring up their names too much. I don't want to infiltrate them. But this one woman, her husband was president of J.P. Morgan Bank, chairman of the board of J.P. Morgan Bank.
Yeah.
Something like that. These were the power elites and they tied to the date Kennedy shot. And look at the date.
Yeah.
They're celebrating killing JFK and getting away from it. Because Kennedy threatened to break up Aramco. He told Faisal, he goes, you know why? Because the Saudi family was involved with body mutilations of young boys, sodomy with young boys, basically slaves. And it was getting in the media. It was coming into the media. all right? And I think Emmanuel Josephson wrote about it. And President Kennedy, when he met with King Faisal, Crown Prince Faisal,
Saudi prince, right?
he threatened him. He says, if you don't end, Kennedy put human rights on the table. He says, if you don't end these atrocities, okay, we're going to break up Aramco. And Aramco, who's the business partner in Aramco? The Rockefellers. And this was in the media, coming out into the media.
Yeah.
And John McCloy flew to see King Ivan, saw it. I know what they said. They said, those are your customs and traditions, and don't listen to the American president. That's your culture. Just put it in the back room, and we'll take care of Kennedy. That's what they probably said. There's billions and trillions of dollars on the table here.
Wow.
I'm sorry to get worked up. I get passionate about this.
Oh, no, I love it. Let's go back to World War II for a minute. I just want to clarify something that I've been reading about. I want to get your opinion on this. Were the Rockefellers, or was Nelson specifically, did he have anything to do with either Operation Paperclip or moving Nazis or Nazi supporters out of Europe to South America? Do we know that?
They're behind all that. They were all Nazis. They were the biggest backers. The industrial elite of the world were backing Adolf Hitler, because Adolf Hitler was an anti-communist, including the Catholic Church. And Hitler came to the rescue of the Catholic Church in Spain. That's why the Catholic Church, Pope Pius XII, who was in the Rockefellers got him the job as Pope. I told you the story.
Yeah, let's clarify this. So what do you mean? Because there's a conclave and cardinals elect the next pope. Okay, you're in the Sistine Chapel. No one knows what the vote is. Eugenio Pacelli, he's the former nuncio to Germany. That's because, and he's elected in 1939 as Pius XII. What do you mean the Rockefellers got him elected?
He was living, Pope Pius XII. Pacelli was his name. He was living in the home of Myron Taylor. Myron Taylor was president or chairman of the board of U.S. Steel, which here he is right here, Roger Blau. He was at the meeting. We talked about it last time, about the steel pricing. They built a room for the pontiff. It was a cathedral. Here's the thing, okay? Did you know Allen Dulles' nephew became a cardinal, a Jesuit cardinal?
Yes,
I've been to his grave. He's buried about 70 miles from here at the cemetery here for the missionaries. And
yeah, he was a convert, and John Foster Dulles, his father, was appalled that Avery was converting to Roman Catholicism.
He's also related to William Seward. Avery Dulles is related to William Seward, but that's another system. That comes back to the history of Auburn. And it was William Seward opened up Daytown with the Catholic Church, with the Vatican. Why? Because that was huge. That was earth-shattering, because this was a Protestant country that came here. People fled Europe to get away from Catholicism, to establish a Protestant beachhead here. And here comes this very Protestant trying to negotiate with the Pope. But I want to get back on the subject.
Okay, but hang on. Just to clarify, you're talking William Seward, who was President Lincoln's Secretary of State.
He's an Auburnian. I'm from Auburn.
Okay.
And John Foster Dulles' wife is from Auburn.
Okay.
They're June Pomeroy Avery.
Okay.
The Pomeroys and the Stewards that are married.
Got it. Okay. All right. So move up now then to what is Avery Dulles, or what does the Dulles have to do with Pacelli?
Okay, here's the thing. Let me get back to here's what's going on. The College of Cardinals was started 300 almost several years, 300 almost 4 centuries ago now, right? College of Cardinals. To do what? For what purpose? To prevent big money from running the Vatican. Okay. When the Rockefellers, the titans of industry, came around, their wealth was beyond what these people try to defend against. Their money was so great, their power was so great, their wealth was that this College of Cardinals cannot defend against the Rockefeller money wealth, nor could the United States government. That's why they corrupted every sector. That's why the current Pope is totally in compliance with the Rockefeller social engineering programs. The College of Cardinals was inadequate 350 years later to stand up to the wealth and might of the Rockefellers. And Pacelli was taking money from, they built a cathedral for this guy. The next thing he pops up as Pope.
Where was this cathedral?
Well, I'm exaggerating a little.
Right, I know, but where?
I mean, it was
in the US?
Myron Taylor's home on the Gold Coast in Long Island. FDR used to frequently visit. The home is in pretty much shambles, less I knew, as it has been abandoned. Lionel's old mansion got abandoned, right? He was a frequent, and of course he was too. Myron Taylor was the ambassador to the Vatican for Roosevelt.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was Roosevelt. Yeah. So Roosevelt frequently visited there.
Okay. Okay.
And he was a Catholic. He worked his way up. He was not from the old Protestant money.
Right.
And Rockefeller, you see how Rockefeller, we've had this discussion before. Rockefeller is the true founder of US Steel, although they will deny their ownership because they hid their shares in a proxy, Bertrand Cutler. We talked about that story. That's
okay.
why,
So just to close the circle then, so you're saying there was this support coming from New York, from the Rockefellers to the Pacelli who became Pius XII.
Yeah.
And thus he had the door open basically to it was like an open door policy for the Rockefellers to come in and out of Rome like during World War II and to tell them what to do.
Well, look at the dots. Where is St. Patrick Cathedral? It's right across the street from the International Building of Rockefeller Center, where all the wartime spooks, Dulles and Helms and Richard and Tracy Barnes and all these people, this goes on and on. Who's the boss of the center? It's Nelson Rockefeller. Actually, Atlas, if you know Atlas, drops a knee to the front door of St. Pat. Well, the Catholics made a lot of money for Rockefeller, working in their steel mines and working in their auto factories and working at, well, a million things.
Yeah. Yeah. But okay, but this was, I mean, it was an anti-communist offensive. Let's, Spellman Catholic Church would team up with all of the guys that you mentioned were rabid anti-communists. So where was the nefarious goings on? Because I mean, to me, it seems like, and I'm playing devil's advocate here with you, but it seems to me that these were anti-communist a union to ward off godless communism coming to the shores of the U.S. What's the problem?
Well, it's not the problem. It goes back to who gave the order to kill JFK. It's a massive history that connects to November 22nd of 1963. There they are. They're their names. They all tie. I mean, here, this postcard. Okay, the postcard, right? Who built 370 Park? Right here, his father, John Hay Whitney. Oh, by the way, the Whitneys are co-founders of Standard Oil. Anytime you see the Whitney name, it means Standard Oil. Why? I'll tell you why. Because one of the six, Standard Oil was never a one-man show. There were six original co-founders. Rockefeller obviously was one, and his brother. But there was also a man named Colonel Oliver Hazard Payne, P-A-Y-N-E. Yeah. He never married. He never had children. His sister Flora Payne married Collins Whitney, who was the head of the New York City branch of the Whitney family. So Payne, when he died, all his money, most of his wealth, went to his Whitney nieces and nephews, and so on and so forth. So they're Standard Oil, and also Tracy Barnes. I mentioned his name, who worked with Dulles. Tracy Barnes is a Whitney, and this ties back to the Federal Reserve Bank because there was his grandfather, Tracy Barnes' grandfather, married a Whitney. His name was Charles Tracy Barney. He was president of the Knickerbocker Bank, which was on Fifth Avenue. Okay, it was one of the richest banks in the country. These are Fifth Avenue. So you got your depositors are the richest people on the planet. It collapsed in the panic of 1907. supposedly Rockefeller and JP Morgan tried to intervene and save it. This is the roots of the Federal Reserve System, Federal Reserve Bank. And they couldn't do it. It went under because of a run on the bank. Tracy Charles Barnes shot himself in the head. Okay. Now, Charles Tracy, he shot himself in the head at home when his wife was there. And his daughter married Barnes. And he's second cousin to Jack Whitney. Then again, let me go over this. Collins Whitney's sister married Charles Tracy Barney. Okay, he was the head of Knickerbocker Bank. The bank collapsed because of a run. A lot of people lost their money. And it was primarily a Whitney-run bank. The Whitneys had a lot of money in the bank. Okay. The Whitneys also owned the Guaranteed Trust Company Bank, which merged with JP Morgan, but that's another story. But Tracy Barnes worked for he was top man in the CIA during the Kennedy administration with the CIA. So who's running the CIA? These people are heirs of Standard Oil Fortune. Who's running the CIA? Plus, he supervised who? Howard Hunt. When Howard Hunt was at the CIA involved, who was supervising him? Tracy Barnes. Now he turns up and Howard Hunt retires. Next thing, he's working out of the basement of the White House. Who's White House? Richard Nixon. Well, by the way, Richard Nixon's at this meeting. Former Vice President Richard Nixon.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Nixon too, but yeah, I mean,
and Nixon at this time was living in Nelson Rockefeller's co-op at the corner of 62nd and Fifth Avenue.
So he was basically bought, right? He lost the 60 election. He was basically put up to be governor, to do the governor run in 62. It was a failure, but you think it was a kind of a sham.
Here's quickly the history of Richard Nixon. The Rockefellers backed him when these were all very anti-communist conservatives, especially Richard Nixon, but Joe McCarthy, the Republicans. Of course, JFK was supposedly anti-communist, but he was progressive like Nelson Rockefeller. But Richard Nixon, the Rockefellers came to loathe Richard Nixon. Why? Because as a congressman, he was investigating the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. There were these three endowments: the Rockefeller Endowment, the Carnegie Endowment, and the Ford Endowment, and the UN were being painted as, they were painting them red, that they believed that these so-called philanthropic charitable foundations were basically facilitating a Soviet-style takeover of the United States. So these Republicans and these conservative Southern Democrats were investigating these and exposing these foundations, where actually the Carnegie Foundation, what the Rockefellers did, we're going back up to 1913, they used these foundations, they moved their stock shares into these foundations, they never relinquished control, they had hidden control, and they were using these foundations to control the oil industry and many other industries. And Richard Nixon, when he was investigating, these investigations were exposing or threatening to expose the Rockefeller hand in all this. That's why, and I believe, I said this before, that the plot to kill Kennedy started with a plot to kill Richard Nixon, because in '58, when Nixon was going for the White House, when Nelson Rockefeller, he won the governorship of New York State in '57. Okay, he put together 70 people to put him in the White House by 1960. Who was in his way? Who was in Rockefeller's way? It wasn't JFK. Not 1958. Who would have been? Vice President Richard Nixon. He was that's why he ran. He didn't want Nixon getting into the White House and exposing and more investigations and exposing these foundations, which were being secretly used to run the oil industry. And then JFK. But see, here's the thing: JFK and Rockefeller were business partners. They owned RKL together, a lot of business interests together. Okay, and RKL was the first tenant in Rockefeller Center. They built a movie theater. They co-founded RKL. And this will tie back to the future, MK Ultra and all that, but I'm going to jump too far ahead of you.
That'll be next time.
Yeah.
Hey, just a couple minutes left. I just want to ask you, where does Nelson, or where does the Rockefeller clan come down on the United Nations? Were they involved in the creation of that?
They started it. Nelson Rockefeller started it. They own the land. They own the land that the UN is built at. Across the street they put up a Chase Bank branch office. So everybody knows it's the Rockefeller Bank. So if you're going to do, you want to come to the UN, you're going to do your banking business with the Rockefellers. And the second floor, they put the New York offices of what? The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And John Foster Dulles, he was chairman of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and was running the State Department and running the UN under dictates of the Rockefellers, according to the writings of Emanuel Josephson. They were using Carnegie's money. They took control. Carnegie was dead now. The Rockefellers moved in and took his money. If you read this book, John Rockefeller's memoirs, he talks about Andrew Carnegie and his relationship with the foundations. Rockefeller wanted to set up he wanted to combine foundations like people combine steel industries and oil industry. He wanted to combine foundations. We talked about Carnegie here. Well, Carnegie was dead. When he died, they moved in. The Rockefellers moved. They took over the Ford Foundation. They took over the Carnegie Foundation. They took over the MacArthur Foundation, John and Catherine MacArthur, MacArthur's name is mentioned in Warren Commission documents. Rodney McCarthy was associated with George Renzi in Mexico. He was heir to one of America's biggest fortunes, and that foundation is run out of Nelson Rockefeller's backyard in the Coach Bar at the convention center, along with many others. We don't know how many foundations they took over, and those three though were on the Warren Commission.
Yeah,
their foundation managers are on the Warren Commission. These people here.
Explorers.
Now I'm going to try to see if John McCloy was at that celebration. I don't know. They only put the big names people in because this is a report out of the newspaper.
He's pretty big in your book too. Hey, Richard, we're gonna have to reconvene for part 3. Okay, man.
Yeah.
Thanks, Richard.
Okay. So long.